I want to tell you about the worst travel decision I have ever made.
And why it turned out to be one of the best nights of my life. I'm Gavin, and today we are going somewhere together.
Tonight, we are going to Hanoi.
It started with a missed flight. Not dramatically missed. Not the running through the airport, shoes in hand kind of missed. Just quietly, stupidly missed. I had the time wrong. I had written 6:15 in my notebook when the ticket said 5:15. A simple mistake. 1 hour. Entirely my fault. I stood at the departure gate. Closed. Locked. The plane already on the runway. And felt that specific, hollow feeling of someone who has no one to blame but themselves.
The next available flight to Hanoi was the following morning.
I had no hotel booked in the city I was currently in, no plan for the night, no local SIM card, which meant no working internet on my phone, a backpack with 3 days of clothes, a dead phone charger I had somehow packed instead of the working one, and about $40 in cash. That was it. That was everything. I stood outside the airport in the thick evening heat and thought, well, let's see what happens. I found the cheap guest house 3 blocks from the airport, the old-fashioned way, by walking until I saw a sign and knocking on the door. $8 a night. A narrow room with a ceiling fan, a firm mattress, and a window that looked out onto a wall. Perfect. I charged my phone using the guest house owner's charger she offered before I even asked, with a smile that required no shared language. And then I went out into the city with no destination, no map, and no plan whatsoever. And that is where the night actually began. I want to tell you something about Hanoi. Hanoi is not a city that greets you gently. It does not ease you in. It does not make itself easy or comfortable or immediately understandable. Hanoi hits you all at once from every direction and then waits to see what you do. The streets of the old quarter are narrow and loud and completely alive. Motorbikes flow through them like water. Not chaotic, not dangerous exactly, but utterly indifferent to the existence of pedestrians. Food stalls line the pavements, their plastic stools spilling out onto the road. The smell of pho and charcoal and exhaust and something sweet frying somewhere mixes in the air into something that shouldn't work, but absolutely does. Neon signs. Karaoke music leaking through a doorway. A grandmother sitting on a low stool, peeling vegetables with the focused calm of someone who has been doing this specific thing in this specific spot for 40 years. 2 old men playing chess under a street lamp, completely unbothered by the noise around them. I walked for 2 hours without stopping. Not toward anything, just through, just looking, just letting the city happen around me. Around 9 o'clock, I found myself at the edge of Hoan Kiem Lake. Hoan Kiem, which means Lake of the Returned Sword, sits in the heart of Hanoi's old quarter. At night, it is lit softly from below, its water dark and still and impossibly calm in the middle of all that urban noise. I sat on a bench at the edge of the water and watched the city move around me. Families walking slowly around the lake, young couples sitting close together on the low stone walls, a group of teenagers doing a K-pop dance routine on the open plaza, perfectly synchronized, completely unself-conscious, absolutely magnificent. An old man doing Tai Chi alone near the water's edge, moving so slowly he seemed to exist slightly outside of normal time. I had nowhere to be, nothing to do, no agenda, no schedule, no list of attractions to tick off. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I had nothing to manage. And something happened in that stillness that I didn't expect.
I relaxed, completely, fully, physically relaxed, in a way that I almost never do when I travel with a plan, when there is always a next thing, always a booking to honor, or a site to reach, or a time to keep.
Here, there was only now. Just this bench, just this lake, just this city doing exactly what it would have been doing, whether I was there or not.
And I thought, this is what it feels like to actually be somewhere, instead of just visiting it. I got hungry around 10. I followed my nose, which in Hanoi is genuinely the best navigation tool available, and found myself down a narrow alley outside a small restaurant but had no English menu, no tourist photos on the wall, and no empty tables. A woman about my mother's age looked up from behind the counter, assessed me quickly, and pointed to a plastic stool at the end of a communal table. I sat down.
She brought me what everyone else was having, a bowl of bun cha, grilled pork patties and slices of pork belly, served in a sweet and slightly sour broth, alongside a plate of fresh rice noodles and a generous pile of herbs. A small dish of spring rolls on the side, a bottle of something cold.
I had not ordered any of it. She had simply decided what I needed. She was right.
I ate slowly, watching the table around me. A group of 4 men sharing a bottle of bia hoi, the light, cheap local beer, served fresh from the barrel. 2 women having a conversation so animated their hands were doing half the talking. A teenage boy doing homework in the corner, entirely unbothered by the noise. The man next to me caught me watching and raised his glass. I raised my water bottle. He laughed, said something in Vietnamese I didn't understand. I shrugged and smiled. He shrugged and smiled back. And somehow, in that small, wordless exchange, I felt more connected to another human being than I had in weeks of traveling with a full itinerary and a perfectly planned route.
That is the thing about having no plan. You stop moving through a place and start actually being in it.
After dinner, I walked some more, down streets I had no names for, past temples I couldn't identify, through a night market where someone tried to sell me a hat I didn't need, and I bought it anyway, because the woman selling it had a laugh that made saying no feel like a mistake. I sat for a while at a small bia hoi corner, one of Hanoi's famous street-side beer stations, where plastic stools are set out on the pavement and cold beer costs almost nothing, and everyone seems to have been there for hours. I ordered a glass and sat and watched and listened to a city that had been doing exactly this, living loudly, warmly, unhurriedly, for 1,000 years. At some point, a young man sat down next to me. He was a student, he said, in careful English he was clearly proud of. He was practicing for a job interview. Could he practice with me? We talked for an hour. He told me about his family, his parents who had sacrificed everything for his education, his dream to work in technology, his nervousness about the future, mixed with a quiet, steady confidence in his own ability that I found genuinely moving. I told him about the missed flight. He laughed so hard he nearly fell off his stool. Then he said, "Maybe you needed to miss it." I thought about that for a long time afterward. I walked back to the guest house around midnight. The city was quieter now. Not silent, never fully silent, but softer. The motorbike streams had thinned. A few food stalls were closing, steam rising from their pots in the cool night air. A dog was asleep in the middle of the road, and the occasional passing motorbike curved around it gently, without honking. I lay on my narrow mattress under the ceiling fan and looked at the ceiling. I had seen no famous temples today. no museums, no organized tour. I had eaten at a restaurant I couldn't name and couldn't find again. I had bought a hat I didn't need. I had sat on a plastic stool and talked to a stranger for an hour in a city I had never planned to spend the night in.
And it had been genuinely, completely, surprisingly, one of the best evenings of my trip.
Maybe of many trips.
I fell asleep thinking about what the student had said. Maybe you needed to miss it. We spend an enormous amount of energy trying to control our experiences, planning, preparing, researching, optimizing. We read reviews before we choose a restaurant. We check the weather before we go outside. We map out our routes before we start walking. We try, constantly, exhaustingly, to ensure that things go the way we want them to go.
And there is nothing wrong with that. Planning is useful. Preparation is sensible.
But sometimes, the plan is also a wall. A wall between you and the unexpected, between you and the spontaneous, between you and the version of an experience that could never have been predicted or planned or found in any review or guidebook. The best meal I had in Hanoi was one I didn't order. The best conversation was one I didn't arrange. The best moment was sitting on a bench at the edge of a lake with nowhere to be, watching a city live. None of that was in the plan, because there was no plan. And I think that is true of life, not just travel.
Some of the best things that have ever happened to you, were they planned? Or did they arrive sideways, unexpected, through a door you didn't know was open?
The job you didn't apply for, but somehow got. The friendship that started from a random seat next to a stranger. The conversation that changed something in you, that you walked into without knowing it would.
Life, like Hanoi, rewards the person who is willing to put down the map sometimes, to walk without a destination, to trust that the city, the world, has something good waiting that you couldn't have found if you were looking too hard for something specific. Before we get to today's vocabulary, I want to say something to those of you learning English. I know the feeling of wanting to have the perfect sentence ready before you speak, of wanting to know exactly the right words before you open your mouth. But language, like travel, rewards the brave ones, the ones who speak before they are ready, who try before they are certain, who walk into the conversation without a map and trust that they will find their way. You will stumble sometimes. You will get lost sometimes. But getting lost, as I learned in Hanoi, is not always a problem to be solved. Sometimes it is exactly where you need it to be. Now let's look at today's key vocabulary. Word number 1, spontaneous. Spontaneous means happening naturally and without planning, arising from a natural impulse rather than from external pressure. For example, the best experiences in Hanoi were completely spontaneous, unplanned, and unexpected. Word number 2, itinerary. An itinerary is a detailed plan or schedule for a journey, a list of places to visit and things to do in a specific order. For example, for the first time, I had no itinerary, and it was the most freeing feeling I had experienced in years. Word number 3, communal. Communal means shared by a group of people, belonging to or used by a community. For example, I sat at a communal table, surrounded by locals, and somehow felt immediately at home.
Word number 4, unself-conscious. Unself-conscious means not worried about how others see you, natural, and free from awkward self-awareness. For example, The teenagers danced with completely unself-conscious joy, entirely unbothered by who was watching.
Word number 5. Optimize. To optimize means to make something as good or effective as possible, to find the best version of something. For example, we spend so much energy trying to optimize our experiences that we sometimes miss them entirely.
Word number 6. Spontaneous. I already used that one. Let me give you a different one. Word number 6. Indifferent. Indifferent means having no particular interest or concern, not caring one way or the other. For example, the motorbikes move through the streets, utterly indifferent to the existence of pedestrians. Word number 7. Sideways. Used figuratively, sideways means arriving in an unexpected, indirect, or unplanned way, not straight on, but from an angle you didn't see coming. For example, the best things in life often arrive sideways, through doors we didn't know were open. We have reached the end of today's episode. And I hope, somewhere in these past 18 minutes, Hanoi gave you something. Not just a picture of a city, but a feeling. The feeling of putting down the map, of sitting somewhere new with nowhere to be, of trusting that the unexpected, the missed flight, the wrong turn, the restaurant with no English menu, might just be the beginning of the best story you've ever told.
You don't have to go to Hanoi to feel this.
You just have to be willing, once in a while, to let go of the plan.
To walk without a destination. To sit still long enough for something unexpected to find you. To say yes to the plastic stool, and the unnamed dish, and the stranger who wants to practice his English.
Because that is where the real stuff lives. Not in the perfectly planned itinerary, not in the 5-star review, not in the optimized, researched, pre-approved experience.
It lives in the unplanned hour, the wrong turn that led somewhere right, the night you had no plan and found exactly what you needed.
Thank you so much for spending this morning with me. If tonight's story took you somewhere unexpected, please give it a like. Share it with a friend who needs to hear that it's okay to let go of the plan sometimes. And subscribe so we never miss a morning together.
I'm Gavin. Put down the map. Trust the city. See what finds you.
And I will see you next week.